Dorothy Sayers. Y'all know Dorothy Sayers, right? Lord Peter Wimsey. She's a detective writer, but she has a book with 18 essays called The Whimsical Christian. If you've never read it before, it's quite the read. In her essay called "The Dogma is the Drama," it starts, "Any stigma," said a witty tongue, "will do to beat a dogma. And the flails of ridicule have been brandished with such energy of late on the threshing floor of controversy that the true seed of the word has become well nigh lost amid the whirling of chaff. Christ, in his divine innocence, said to the woman of Samaria, 'Ye worship ye know not what,' being apparently under the impression that it might be desirable, on the whole, to know what one was worshiping. He thus showed himself sadly out of touch with the 20th century mind, for the cry today is, 'Away with the tedious complexities of dogma. Let us have the simple spirit of worship, just worship, no matter what.'" And then in the essay "Creed or Chaos," she says, "The brutal fact is that in this Christian country, not one person in 100 has the faintest notion what the church teaches about God or man or society or the person of Jesus Christ." Still holds true today from more than 50 years ago. It's a problem, right? Just biblical illiteracy. And for us as Lutherans, our biblical illiteracy also, we can't expect people to be literate about the liturgy if they're not even literate about the scriptures, right? Why do we do what we do on Sunday morning? Well, who knows? It's just what we've always done. So just do it. Turn to page 5, right? One of those non-communion Sundays, or turn to page 15 and just do it. So my goal is to reorient a person, in all of this, these gender issues, to reorient a person surrounding the narrative that God has established in the Scriptures, our life beginning at the font and culminating in the feast, which is exactly what the worship service does for us. We begin at the font, we're culminated in the feast, okay? Reclaiming Lutheran identity through liturgical catechesis. Another book that is really foundational for me is called The Plain Sense of Things by James Edwards. James Edwards is not a Christian, okay? But what he is examining is what happens when religion no longer norms society. What happens when there is no religious influence? And in the beginning of his book, he divides all of history into 4 divisions of time. The first is the age of the gods, the age of the forms, the age of ego-subjectivity, and the age of transvalued values. And that's it. And there can be no other age because of the nature of the age of transvalued values, is what he's saying. The world will forever be, these 2 ages, ego-subjectivity and transvalued values, will always be at odds with each other, fighting, so it's just this endless, vicious circle. But I want to take you through some of this. The age of the gods teaches that there's a sovereign God who asserts his sovereignty. And as far as the people are concerned, they're just trying to figure out who this God is. So get right with God, figure out how to get right with him, or get zapped. That's it. It doesn't matter who God is in this age, just the fact that there is some God who's God over all. So this can be God, or you can have this as your God, or this, or this. It doesn't matter. Whatever image of God you want, whatever religion you want, whoever is God is God. This is just the way things operate in the age of the gods. But the age of the gods would give way to the age of the forms. And of course, this started around 350 BC with Plato, right? So Plato comes and he says, there's got to be more to life than just trying to get right with God. There's got to be more to life than that. What's real? Are you real? Am I real? Are the windows real? Are the trees real? What's real? So life becomes about trying to figure that out. And then your salvation is in tune with that. So I'm sure y'all are familiar with the Republic, Plato, the Republic. So this begins about 350 BC with Plato, and it goes all the way through the Middle Ages. I mean, think about that. That's 1,800 years of a philosophy, and that's very hard to spin out of. That's a hard track to go back to. So in the Republic, he has this allegory of the cave where you have prisoners chained to the wall, and they're viewing reality as they know it by shadows that are cast from something else, except they don't know the shadows are only the shadows until the prisoners get out and they see finally what's real. Okay? So, and they go back into the cave and they tell the other prisoners, guess what? Our reality that we have been living is false. There's actually something that's casting that shadow, and it shows us what reality really is. We see this kind of thinking in the Divine Comedy with Dante. You have an Inferno, Purgatory, Paradise, and in Paradise, you're left, the final image is of salvation, of eternity. And tell me if you've heard this before in your congregations. Eternity, perfection for Dante, is simply sitting there staring at the perfection of God. Simply sitting there beholding God for who He is, because He is the pure and perfect form. Right? I mean, people all the time, well, what's heaven going to be like? Are we just going to be in heaven singing and looking at God? That sounds kind of boring. You know, but this is all age of the form stuff. It's where it's coming from. And Dante nails it in the Divine Comedy. The Island. I know you've seen it. Anybody else seen the movie The Island? Hollywood is plagued with age of the forms type stuff. I'm going to spoil the movie for you, and you're just going to have to deal with it. But watch it anyway. It's a good movie. Yeah, same thing. So The Island, you're introduced to these two characters. Ewan McGregor is Lincoln 6 Echo, and Scarlett Johansson is Jordan 2 Delta. Weird names, right? It's set in futuristic times, and everybody's wearing white jumpsuits, and everybody's getting food, and just everything's very mechanic. You don't really know what's going on until the Ewan McGregor character starts having issues. He starts having weird dreams, and he's talking to the guy who's over this facility, and it turns out that there's been a plague of some sorts over the earth. And these people in this facility were the fortunate ones who were found. They were decontaminated, and their hope is to one day go to this island, this mysterious island that's the last place on earth that was not contaminated. Okay? Ewan McGregor is a very curious man, so he starts examining the facility, ends up finding a bug, following the bug up a ladder, and he climbs through the ladder, and when he climbs through the ladder, what he thinks is the ceiling is actually the floor of a hospital. So, like the allegory of the cave, he's escaping the cave. And what he sees in that hospital, aside from people talking very weird, calling each other names like dude, he's never heard that before, he sees these people who have been called to the island. And they're in the hospital, and what's happening to them in the hospital is that they're harvesting their organs or a child, and then they're killing the person. These people in the facility are clones, right? Futuristic sci-fi stuff. They're clones. And it's insurance policy for the wealthy people, right? So you clone these people. He finds out what's real. He goes back down into the facility and tells the female character that there is no island. I know what's real, and we've got to get out. Okay? So this is all age of the form stuff. The Matrix is the same thing, right? You need to be in tune with what's real. This, through the medieval times, would give way to the rise of the age of ego subjectivity, and this is the birth of modernism, and we're all familiar with this. René Descartes, where everybody began a great time of questioning. If we don't know what's real, how can we be sure of anything? All right, so Descartes comes along and breaks down everything in existence, and he has no answer to his question. So he says, well, that was fun to take apart the puzzle. I guess I'll put it back together now. And when he puts together the puzzle of life, rather than having God as the central figure, he says, I think, therefore I am. So rather than having God at the center, he now has man, this egocentric view of creation. And of course, modernism is going to give birth to the Enlightenment. You can kind of see this beginning to snowball. So I'm going to decide what's real. It's up to me. No longer the age of the gods where there's just reality and you deal with it. It's going to be up to me to figure all of that out. And if I can't understand it, it can't be real. I mean, this is modernism. If it's beyond my comprehension, it just doesn't exist. If it doesn't make sense to me, forget it. So now, finally, after all the history of the world, in the late 1500s, 1600s, man is now free from the shackles of God, and the opportunities for man are endless. You know, obviously a great time of reason. You start seeing the rise of the universities during this time, and of course the Enlightenment. These principles on which our country was founded, figure it out and do it. And it's a great time to celebrate everything that we've accomplished. You know, put our minds together, let's reason through it, and let's celebrate. The sky's obviously the limit. And here's the most dangerous thing. This is your thought. Nothing bad can happen when man is allowed to do what he wants and when he's given the tools necessary to succeed. Nothing bad can happen when you give me what I need to do, because of course I'm going to have the goodwill of everybody else in mind. Jefferson, Locke, Franklin, this is how our nation was built. So automatically when we have churches coming over into this country, we're sold out into the Enlightenment, which you can, I'm sure, still see remnants of. So Darwin, of course, is during this era. Creation. I can't understand that. How a God who I don't know and can't understand is invisible. How he can create the world and everything in it in 6 24-hour days doesn't make sense. So let me give you another theory about how this happened. Encyclopedia system, this is where it came from. What was the purpose of the encyclopedias? It wasn't so people could go get a book off the shelf and look up stuff. The point of the encyclopedias was, look how much we know. From A to Z, we know it all. Look how great we are. We've figured everything out. Scientific proof, right? We got to have this physical reality and certainty. You know, before the Enlightenment, God he just was. But now we got to have proof. Prove him to me. Modernism gives rise to transvalued values, and this man whether you love him or hate him, brilliant. Nietzsche comes and onto the scene, and there's no way to know what's real. Your ideas of what's real aren't mine, and you can't prove to me what's real because, that's just not my idea. So there's no truth. Modernity. There's a bottom to the pool, right? There's a bottom to the pool. Nietzsche would say, modernity, give me the tools I need to find it. Nietzsche says, no, there's no bottom. And as soon as a modernist would claim to find the bottom, Nietzsche says, no, that's just your idea of a bottom. That's not really what it is. Everything becomes a value. Just your ideas, your thoughts, and it's whatever makes you feel good, okay? So if playing a sport or going to school or this makes you feel better, do it. I don't necessarily like those things, so I'm not going to do it, and you can't force me to do it. You do it, and it'll make you happy. Great if it works well. So the Enlightenment then, and this is hard for our country to come to grips with. That's why we still have so many modernists, because the very principles on which our nation was founded is toppling into hopelessness at this point. If everything is just a value, yours or mine and mine over yours, we've got a problem. Those are just your dreams. Those are just your thoughts. The American dream, no, that's just the way you think. God is dead. And we've killed him because he's just become a value. So he's right. At Nietzsche's death in 1900, we were in the golden age. So all the while he's talking this way in his life, he looks like a fool. Looks like a fool. Look at how much we've learned. Look at how much we've done. Nothing's stopping us. Nothing's in our way. But as the 20th century gets rolling, of course, he begins to look brilliant because you have human beings fighting in the trenches of World War I. If only we're given what we need, we can succeed and we can make the world a better place. And then, of course, the crash of the stock market happens. So he's looking more and more brilliant. And then perhaps most of all, when Nietzsche was could be deemed a prophet, was when the Enlightenment birthed their biggest and best child of all, Adolf Hitler. Product of the Enlightenment, bought into all its principles, and he's formed and fashioned perfectly from this movement. So the Ubermensch, I'm sure you've heard a lot about the Ubermensch, especially with our last presidential election and some comparisons here and there. We're not going to make those today. This view of the world says we're all sheep in a world, and we have no meaning. We just graze along, do what we want. Nothing means anything. Everything is just day by day, boring, can be chaotic at times, and nobody has any understanding of anything until one sheep rises above the rest and says, I found greener pastures. The problem with the sheep is he has to convince the rest of the sheep that his values are actually better than everybody else's. Okay? If you'll just listen to me, I'll lead you to greener pastures. So he's a sheep that rises up and says, you know what, your life isn't going the way you want. Come follow me, and I'll show you a better way. What's the problem with this? Huge problem is that he's just a sheep, right? He's just an ignorant, stupid sheep with his head down, and he's going to lead everybody off the cliff just like any other sheep would. Sheep cannot lead sheep, but it's how we live. Somebody rises up and convinces you that their values in this style of world, their values are better than yours, or more important, and you begin to get a following. In a world where we make our own story, chaos reigns. Dorothy Sayers, creed or chaos. It's one or the other. Chaos reigns. There are no rules, no truth, just values, and mine are better than yours. That's how we live. So there are all the sheep going around in a circle. Of course, you can make joke about the black sheep or the or the sheep there on the top corner that's just turned around and faced all the rest and is going to get run over. But it's the world of the shopping mall. Okay, so you have this world where everybody lives in this mall. Okay, and there are all different kinds of stores that you go in. You can go in the you go in a certain fashion store, you go in a sports store, you go in a school store, and you begin to build your identity according to where you visit. Some places you're going to visit more than others. Some places you won't visit at all, but the places you don't visit at all, deal with it. They're in the mall. Just pass them by and don't go in, and just leave everybody alone, right? Just tolerate the people in the mall. Craft your own identity. You know, sometimes people drag you into those stores you just don't want to go in. Just deal with it for a couple minutes. You know, when Grandma wants to bring you to church, she wants to take you to the church store, right? I mean, this brings church shopping to a whole new level, right? Just tolerate it for a little bit. And what are the stores we typically want to go in? Well, get some window dressing, right? Get some flash. So all of a sudden you have lights, you have fog machines. That's later. Tolerate it. But just because you don't like a store doesn't give you the right to shut it down. Just deal with it, unless, of course, it's the church store, and then it's causing us problems. Deal with it. In this context, where things are just values, you choose religion like you choose a sports team or your favorite band, right? And you build your own identity. You really do. And it's a game. Right? How do I feel today? No longer any such thing as worship in this kind of world. It's just you're bound to an allegiance. And when your team isn't winning, you change teams. You're really just bound to an allegiance. There's no worship. So you go to worship here at St. Paul's because Grandma does. So you can cheer for this team. Or this one.
Oh, Lord. I gotta admit
That's right. I know. That's why it's there. You can look like this. Or you can look like this. Worship can be like this. Or it can be like this. And you can't tell me I'm wrong in this world, because that makes me feel good. It's therapeutic for me. So here it is, right? Coexist with everybody in the shopping mall of life. Where do we fit? We're actually in the age of the gods, right? If we're going to be honest about it, the problem the church has is the church is trying to live in the age of transvalued values and fit in and kind of mesh with this society, say, how can we meet this society where it is? You know, how can we bait and switch these people into showing them that Christianity is, how can we be the Ubermensch of society and say that Christianity is the value that transcends all other values? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. We're off track. And until we recognize that we are ancient, right? People call us old-fashioned, and that's okay. It's a good thing. Is the world mine or is it God's? And all this boils down to an identity crisis, which is where I'm coming from. The world now says you decide who you are, use whatever, whoever, however to succeed. The sky is the limit, and if anything holds you back, eliminate it. And American Christianity says you decide who you are, use whatever, whoever, however to succeed. The sky's the limit. And if anything holds you back, eliminate it, or I'll just go somewhere else. My small group's no longer getting along. So I'm going to take my small fishing group or my golf group to another upstart church, and we're going to get things rolling there. So here's your proof. I don't know if that's too small. Don't just accept whatever comes your way in life. You were born to win. You were born for greatness. You were created to be a champion in life. These are Christian people. You cannot expect to live a positive life if you hang with negative people. Forget the forgiveness of sins. Forget loving your neighbor and trying to figure out, you know, somebody's a jerk. They're a jerk, but you know, I think we owe it to them to go to them to figure out what's going on. I mean, most people aren't a jerk just to be a jerk. It's forgiveness of sins, the peace of Christ. You can take pride in yourself without comparing yourself to anyone else. If you can run your race and be the best that you can be, then you can feel good about yourself. So again, forget everybody else. Don't simply settle for what your parents had. You can go further than that. You can do more, have more, be more. This is worship stuff, by the way. It doesn't matter who likes you or who doesn't like you. All that matters is that God likes you. He accepts you. He approves of you. If you stay in your faith, you're going to get paid. I'm now living my reward. That was a former Lutheran who said that one. Right? Joyce Meyer. The other top ones are our friend we saw on TV last night, of course. And then a couple more, not quotes, but there was one of these evangelists who on social media, in order to have a good 2017, she simply quoted Genesis 11, verse 6, and said, whatever you put your mind to, you can make it happen. Nothing will be impossible for you. Genesis 11:6. The problem with that is Genesis 11:6 is the Tower of Babel. It's a condemnation. She's using a condemnation in the Scriptures as nothing will be impossible for you. Just believe in God. But here we are back in Babylon. The other one, this one's great. On what you get if you worship God, this one was on one of those motivational calendars that you turn the page and it gives you a nice thing. And this one has a picture of the world on it. It's just a nice picture. And, it basically says you can have whatever you want if you just worship God. Right? All this if you just worship God. What's the problem with Luke chapter 4, verse 7? Those are the words of Satan tempting Jesus. But these are used in Christianity today. All this can be yours if you'll just bow down and worship me. I'm looking at this and I thought, I don't remember Jesus saying that. Right? And you look it up and well, no wonder. This is the devil. And that's exactly, they're not even, they've got our nation, our Christian believers in this nation so brainwashed that they're putting out quotes from Satan and they're eating it up. It's all about me. Deal with it. So here's your question. What is truth? Our identity is not something that we invent ourselves. This is why the church in America cannot continue to fight or find its place intermingling with this age of transvalued values. We have no place in this age when we try to just intermingle ourselves with it. No matter what kind of new evangelism tactic, no matter what we come up with, we've got to quit trying to be evangelical better than the evangelicals too. It's garbage. And just be faithful. We don't make the rules. And society hates this. We have no narrative. Post-modernity, post-postmodernity, whatever we're calling it these days. You visit the shopping mall and you create your own life. You create your own narrative. You create your own story. The problem with that is we actually have a God who creates and has told us who we are. And we're at odds with that. And without the narrative, we descend into chaos and despair, creed or chaos. So we're in a period now, 21st century America, of self-discovery. If somebody has not told me who I am, if I have to discover who I am, think about this. We send our children from here in 6th grade into the middle school as if pre-K 3 through 6 is turning out perfectly mature Christians that they're ready to take on middle school by themselves, armed with chapel talks, At a time in a child's life that is the most tumultuous and chaotic as it's ever been in their life, middle school, they go off to discover who they are. And identity is as shallow as how you feel one day. I feel like a woman today. But our Lord has said, and this is where our story, God's story, enters in. Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You belong to me. This appears in Isaiah chapter 43, which is pivotal for Israel. The breaks in Isaiah, 1 through 39, and then 40 to 55 and 56 to 66. 40 to 55 is specifically talking to Israel as they would be in exile. 1 through 39 is warning them of exile and calling for repentance. 40 to 55 starts, comfort, comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem. Okay? It's a prophecy as they would be in exile. The promise of deliverance from there. So while these people are in Babylon, while these people would be meeting a society that wanted them to forsake their identity for the sake of the kingdom of Babylon, right? Babylon would give you whatever you wanted so long as you would help the kingdom advance and thrive. But if you wouldn't, you'd go to the lion's den. It's just the way it was. And God says, do not forget. Do not forget. I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You belong to me. Yeah, I was mad. Chapter 50, I was mad. I slammed the door when I left. But where is your certificate of divorce? Our identity is in the actual person of Jesus. Not whether or not we have Him in our heart, and certainly in not what the world has to say. Our lives are conformed to His when we're washed in the waters of baptism. This is where it starts. We are who Jesus says we are. So we have a society that constantly struggles with identity. Who are we? How can we make our churches better so that more people will come in? And we spend our entire lives fighting with this when it's very clear from the very beginning at the font. This is who you are. The Word of God must be central in all of this. It must be the norm. And it's what the world is after. Despite what current evangelical tactics and practices are, it's exhausting to try to create an identity for yourself. It's the narrative that's been lost. I use I like to steal words from people. Narrative is a very postmodern word, but I'm going to steal it from them. Just like I'm about to steal one from the Roman Catholics. A thief. People are starving for this. So we give it. And we give this narrative loudly, boldly, and clearly as in the divine service as we begin at the font and culminate in the feast. This is where it happens. And if our sanctuaries are absent, or the divine service is absent from our sanctuaries, if we stop short before the feast, you're not getting the whole narrative. When I was on vicarage, I was administering the sacrament to shut-ins. And I would go, I hadn't been on these calls before. I would go to these shut-ins, and the way I administered the sacrament to them was to walk in to their home, have a conversation with them, and then just kind of, for a couple of minutes, and then lay out the sacrament and do a brief confession. I would read the confession and I'd say, is this your confession? Yes. Okay, your sins are forgiven. I would say the words of institution, and I would administer the sacrament, do the benediction, and I'd leave. And I hate that I did that to people. I thought I was doing them a favor. I thought that because they were shut in and maybe could only come out of their bedroom for 5 or 10 minutes and they'd be so exhausted they'd have to go to bed. I thought I was doing them a favor by shortening what I did and just kind of getting to the point of delivering the goods. But to this day, I hate that I did that because they needed the narrative. I can't imagine how it would feel to be. I know what I see when I go see my shut-ins, but I'm not in the bed. Somebody who needs their place in God's story and doesn't need to be shortchanged the service of the Word and sacrament together. In the divine service, it is very much about the real world in which we live. It proclaims who we are and whose we are. It proclaims a world that was good and right, went terribly wrong. Very important. Christ is actually present. You've heard this for 2 days now. Christ is actually present. And the whole thing is being told through the prophets, through the patriarchs, the apostles. And then Christ shows up and serves as our host, where the world's story is given an eternal reality. When you approach the altar, you're stepping up to Golgotha. You know, the divine service is timeless. I mean, this is the eternal reality for us, present for us in that moment. But we go through the motions, right? Sunday morning, people open their hymnals. They don't open their hymnals. They show up late, walking around during the reading of the scriptures, in and out, and it's just rote. And even for us, sometimes it can become that way. And I hope that we reclaim that. Do people leave early after the sacrament? Sometimes. You know who the first one to do that was? Now, I'm not saying write a newsletter article or preach on it, but the first one to leave the sacrament early was Judas. On this journey, we're accompanied by angels, archangels, and all the company of heaven as we sing their songs. See, their songs. We're singing them. We don't have to invent anything. Worship immerses us into this reality. You're God's forgiven child. The font seals it, the absolution declares it, and the feast celebrates it. See, that's what, the service begins at the font, and this is another thing that we've done to our people is, we like to start one place, scare them to think that, oh, maybe I'm not a Christian, and then say, oh, wait, no, just kidding, you are. And they get to the sermon, oh, you're not a Christian, you better get right or, get zapped, this kind of thing. And, oh, no, don't worry, Jesus saved you, you're okay. Whew. We preach people in and out of the kingdom, and this can't happen. We keep people in their baptismal identity, and people struggle enough being a baptized child of God in this world. We don't need to confuse them when they're here. Our God is not a sheep leading sheep. He's the good shepherd. He took on our form in order to save us because we cannot save ourselves. The divine service keeps us focused on our successes and failures, not on our successes and failures, not on our cool dad Jesus, who never says anything about sin, but on the cross of Christ, and it's centered there, always. You know this. What if, there's our buddy, what if education, including higher education, is not primarily about the absorption of ideas and information, but what if it's about the formation of hearts and desires? So rather than feeding people, this is what vicarious atonement is, this is what justification is, and when I ask you on a test, this is what you're going to say. I mean, we've become no better than the public school system, feeding kids test answers so that they're ready for the Board of Elders. What if it were actually about formation? What if we got our children, and I don't have time to talk about the home, but in catechism class, and actually rather than feeding them the terms, rather than telling them to memorize for the sake of memorization, and you're watching them cram it right before class starts so that they can feed it to you, what if it is actually about formation? Do we have the zeal to actually form people and the patience that it takes? Because you're going to be forming children, and parents aren't going to like it because they weren't formed. Especially people who came in as adults and maybe sat in the office and said, well, that's close enough to being Lutheran. You're good, or sit in my class for 2 or 3 weeks and you're good. So liturgical catechesis, I'm stealing a term that is still used in Roman Catholicism and in Orthodoxy. But the Roman Catholics and the Orthodox want to use liturgical catechesis in order to form social justice warriors. Right? We're gonna teach you all this stuff about what we do in church, so that then you in turn go out and fight for the little guy and do all these things. That's not my goal. Okay? And I have to redefine this and take unnecessary pages to do it. But so in liturgical catechesis, we explore and discuss the doctrines introduced in the divine service, see the history of it, and that it just wasn't made up to suit a certain culture. So what you get when you start messing with worship, when you start messing with the divine service to suit a certain generation, you wind up with an extremely fractured church. The example I use is like a men's suit. There are some suits that my grandfather wore that if they fit me, I could still wear today. You know, dark suits, pinstripe, something like that. And then there are some of those crazy suits that came out in the 70s, right? Yeah, I think of the movie Dumb and Dumber, right? Harry and Lloyd in the bright orange and bright blue suits. But you couldn't wear those. Those were for a certain time, right? We have the dark pinstripe suits, right? We don't need to tailor things just to meet a certain generation. So you read, mark, learn, and inwardly digest the Holy Scriptures that are central to the divine service. And finally, you're fed and nourished as you gather at the feast with angels and the saints, where our Lord feeds us His holy body and blood for the forgiveness of our sins. So sit back, relax. That's what I tell my adults. Sit back, relax. You're forgiven, free in Christ. In worship, nothing is asked or demanded of you, only freely, given freely and received wholly, without any merit or worthiness in you. It's divine service, after all. So we begin at the font, we end at the feast. And what I do in my curriculum, I've developed 2 separate curriculums, one for my youth and one for my adults. My youth, when I arrived here, our catechism class was only 2 years, and I was okay with that, except it was impossible to get everything done. You just can't cover it. So when I got here, my first class, I obviously only had for 1 year. We were in mid-February, early March, and we would be going through the catechism, and I would recall stories from the Old Testament, be talking about Noah and the flood and baptism, and be talking about Abraham and covenants. And one of the students back in October had made some snide comment about not knowing who Abraham was. You know, just like trying to derail the conversation. But in mid-February, early March, I realized that they actually didn't know who Abraham was. I was about to recommend them for confirmation, and for the first time I realized there was no knowledge of the Scriptures. And that was a big problem. So what I do is very, very basic. My first year with them, I take them through the Old Testament up through the exile. We spend 30 weeks from Genesis just to exile. Second year, of course, I do a little rehash of what happened first year, and I take them through the intertestamental period, because a lot of this is crafted on identity. And if there ever was a chaotic time for the identity of God's people, it was during the intertestamental period. If you've never studied it, please do. And then we read a gospel together. And then we do the small catechism. Third year, and at the end of second year, I put in their hands the Book of Concord. Third year, we're in the hymnal, and we're on page 184. And I take what we've done with the Scriptures and the catechism already, and I put it in the form of the divine service, very slowly, starting with baptism. With the confession absolution, you got, original sin, baptism, actual sin, 10 commandments, this kind of thing. But we walk through the service and its history, and everything from start to finish. I'm not going to parse or anything like that. We've had this, but by the end, they have an understanding of why we do what we do. I mean, I'm like a lot of you. Even after graduating the seminary, I still didn't know why we did what we do. You do it because it's just there. I mean, you used to use page 5 and 15. Well, your page is 184 now. Get reoriented. And that's just what it was. None of the history was taught. And that was a problem. But in teaching it, it's become a delight. I told some of you last night that this past summer, one of my 8th grade girls who had just been confirmed carried into an elders meeting the Book of Concord, and had her Book of Concord turned to Article 24 of the Augsburg Confession, and she read to the elders. If I weren't a pastor, even just as a layperson, I still probably wouldn't approach the Board of Elders. In she comes, and she reads Article 24, and she says, "Why do we not have communion every Sunday?" See, that's the goal, right? Because she gets it. She understands, right? We start at the font, we go to the feast, but you've eliminated the feast for me. As far as adults, I put them straight into the hymnal. I do probably take too much for granted with my adults from a scriptural standpoint, but we take. It's probably 14 weeks going through the divine service, and that's how I introduce them to Lutheranism, is simply by what we do on Sunday morning, because you cannot divorce doctrine and practice. This is what we do on Sunday morning. This is now who we are, and like I said, I'm in the very early stages of this, so I don't have a lot of results or anything like that, but it seems fitting that in a world that struggles with identity, when you lay out to the world the answer to that, and just say, look, it's kind of like your Baptist convert, just come in and write. You're free. You don't have to work for yourself anymore. You don't have to struggle with your salvation. Just come in. Don't struggle with your identity anymore. This is what God says about you.
Yeah, there's something that both you and Father Bean brought up that got me thinking. While I recognize the situation we have and the polity we have in the Missouri Synod, I think it needs to be said that the authority, at least this is my opinion, even in our church body, the authority to decide whether to have every Sunday communion does not lie with the voters, nor does it lie with the elders. It lies with the pastor. Now, he may want to have certain things of diplomacy in mind, of course, but it's his decision. What I did when I came to Kewanee, and they were having it every Sunday, but in alternate services, which is kind of a cop-out, I began to teach. I taught in newsletter articles, Bible class. I invited everyone to come, and a lot of people came. And I started right in teaching about the importance of the sacrament and its frequency. And I did this with the elders too, and I really hit hard with the elders. And I think I had them pretty much on board, but not all of them. And then I set a date. I came in the summertime, early summertime. And I said, I think we're going to do this Reformation Sunday. And I'm not requiring anyone to come up to the altar, but I'm offering starting at that. Now, there was a lot of rebellion behind the scenes, and I caught a lot of grief for it. But I just think that needs to be understood.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And we were just talking at lunch, and the unfortunate thing for a lot of us, and teaching is absolutely key. I mean, you can't just go in and start changing things, but you're taught all these things at the seminary. You're taught how to be faithful, how to do this, how to do that, and then you're told this is going to be your ordination vow. You know, you're binding yourself to this Book of Concord, and then you get into a place that forces you to practice a way that is against the vow you just took. You know, we do not abolish the Mass. We have the Lord's Supper every Lord's Day. We wear vestments. We do these things, and all of a sudden it's not there. Constitutions in the church do the same thing.
I would approach that a little bit differently. I'd say what is forcing you is your sense of diplomacy, which, you know, may be an important thing for a while, but again, the decision to move to where we need to be belongs with the pastor.
I agree with you completely.
Father, I'm going to respectfully disagree with you. You say it's the pastor's decision whether or not to.
This pastor's decision what? I'm sorry.
Whether or not to have every Sunday communion. I respectfully disagree. Decision implies it's a choice. It should be we have it every Sunday, not whether it's an option for him to say whether or not. We have it. That's what the scripture teaches. That's what the confessions say. It's not an option to have to decide not to have it.
Well, I'm not saying everyone has to take communion.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying it should not even be an option for him not to offer it every Sunday. We should have it.
I think he's understanding you to say that it should be up to that it's up to the pastor. You know, if a pastor wants to have it once every month or once every quarter, that he's free to. I think that's how.
Oh, right. No, I agree with that. I'm just saying that one pastor's sense of diplomacy with regard to the situation where he's put
in love,
in terms of how long he wants to wait to get it back to where it needs to be.
We can be patient in love, yes.
Yeah, but yes, I don't think we're free to say, well, I don't think we need sacrament so often. Let's just offer it. Let's just feed my sheep once a month.
However, I do think there are some in Missouri, pastors in Missouri, who would say that.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying.
How many, if I can ask a question, how many of you were taught by a pastor at whatever point in your catechesis specifically what's going on with the divine service? Or how many had it? Let me ask it this way. How many of you just were handed a hymnal and said, here, this is what we do, so participate? I mean, and to me that's a problem, because if this is just what we do and participate, well, I don't like that. I'm going to go somewhere where I like. But when we're orienting people around the divine service and saying, no, this is what the people of God do and have always done, I think it's harder for people to leave. You know? I do. When you actually know that Christ is showing up to a place, and by the way, every other Sunday or alternating service communion really hinders preaching too, because you almost got to craft two sermons. If you're leading people to the feast, it's like, oh, you know, and here. Well, it's not. It was here an hour ago, but it's not here anymore. Or it'll be here in a little while. So stick around. You know. But you know, you're getting people to the feast. This is eternity for us. New creation stuff at the feast of the Lamb and His kingdom, which has no end. That's where we're headed, and we get that taste on a Sunday morning. Any other questions? Go ahead.
I really liked your analogy of the shopping mall, seeing the people all wandering around and they're putting on their identity from this shop and that shop, and then one of the shops is the church, or that's the thinking. So how do you convince people that inviting them to church isn't just inviting them, and I'm talking about not non-members, I'm talking about members that come every so often or aren't really regular. How do you convince them that it's not sort of condemning them to just staying in one store forever and it's boring? I mean, but there's all these other stores I want to see.
Yeah, well, even
Can't go there.
So the shopping mall actually has a church department, where once you step through the church doors, all of a sudden you're met with all these other windows, right? And the church has decided, I'm going to make my window the flashiest, so they'll gravitate toward me. And here we are in the Missouri Synod, or should be in the Missouri Synod, with just plain windows. You look through the doors and you see the cross of Christ, but the store kind of looks boring and bare. Well, who's going to wander in there? You know. Of course, every time I say this, it happens. You know, nobody's walking down the sidewalk and wandering into the church doors. Every time I say that, we get a member that way, though. So, yeah, it's like snapping my fingers, right? Stop. People, you know, church signs don't get it anymore. You know, I don't know. It's.
Because they just come. They'll come when they feel pious. Yeah. I'll go to church today because I feel pious.
So for me, it's starting small in Bible class through sermons and immersing the people who are there into that reality. That way, the people who aren't there, when they're not there, they know they're missing something. It may take generations, and it may not work at all. But it's you know, if Christ is there, why should I not be? But we it's almost like we pretend Jesus is here. You know. Yeah, I'm going to say it, but get real. He's really not here. But immersing people into the reality. And I don't want to sound like we're busting at the seams, like I've got all the answers or anything like that. I mean, to be completely honest, when I got here, we had 120 people in Bible class, and today we've got about 40. It's offensive. It's the cross, you know. So I don't know. But it's not necessarily my answer for numbers. It's my solution for faithfulness, I guess. And so, you know, the questions don't come up. Well, why can't we have a contemporary service?
Just to tag onto that a little bit. I mean, I think a lot of it is, and you were getting at this in your presentation, is you're actually engrafting them into the narrative, and you're sort of pulling them out of the transiency of the age of transvalued values. And so I think it takes a while, and it takes that formation. But I know my experience with a lot of millennials is they don't have an anchor, and they're kind of all over the place. But they actually, when they find one, they really appreciate it, you know. And I see a lot of millennials that are just longing for something that's bigger than themselves, and really gravitating toward, you know, the historic creeds and the liturgy and hymns and those sorts of things.
But the church, but the church that the millennials had been fed is the church with strobe lights and clowns. And I mean, I can remember, I grew up as a Baptist. And their calls to worship were, you know, clown shows, like literal clowns, entertaining, you know? And, you know, now you look back and you're thinking, you know, the abomination of desolation of the place it ought not be. But that's the church they were fed. And millennials, for the most part, don't know that churches like we have exist. They don't correlate that to Christianity. So for them, that's Christianity. I don't like it. Christianity is bad. You know, it's a joke. So they're leaving the church because that's all they think the church is. And when they walk through the door, and it's like, man, this group of people believes something. I don't know what they believe, but they believe something.
I mean, my 17, 18-year-olds are the ones that love the chanting and the incense and all of that sort of stuff, you know. So it's kind of interesting to see. But.
This is a personal observation. We're from New Orleans, a lot of Catholic churches. My mother's a 93-year-old Catholic. She, after the floods and recently, she's moved in with us. I take her to Mass, Catholic Mass on Sunday. She comes Sunday morning with us. I take her on Sunday evening. We went to a couple of the churches. One is near my house that I took to once because we had missed the other service we had been going to, does contemporary. And there, you know, contemporary, it's to pull the young in, right? It was mostly people my age in it, 40, 50. The one she goes to is a very traditional, very liturgical, high liturgy. In fact, on certain feast days, they even do the Kyrie in Latin. That has the teenagers and the 20-somethings in it.
Don't listen to the lies that this evangelical movement's telling you that we're running kids off by chanting and doing high church. It's a lie. It's an absolute lie.
How do we account for these very faithful, very liturgical churches with very faithful pastors with liturgy and smells and bells the whole 9 years, and the kids are still leaving? And not just the kids, and just people in general. They don't care. They're not interested.
Yeah, I've got it too. I mean,
how do we account for that then? I mean,
Satan. I mean,
then isn't Satan also bringing them out of the other church?
We're still dealing. I mean, we're still. Jesus himself, you know, repent for the kingdom of God is here, and it's staring you in the face, and you know, immediately people are trying to stone him. It's offensive to people. So it's not, you know, it's not the solution for some new Pentecost movement where we're going to be baptizing thousands by the day. I mean, you try it, and y'all know. I mean, chanting, incense, whatever it is.
Well, I think a lot of it tends to be parents' unwillingness to let their kids be indoctrinated too. I think they'd rather them go out into the world and you know, let them decide what they want to believe. And I mean, by and large, if I have kids that are where they need to be every week, if they're in worship on a weekly basis, and if they're in catechism class and that, then they're probably sticking around. So I don't know, but.
They're not coming. I think it's I was born 1960, and everybody, I was raised in Catholic, so our family, neighbors, everybody went to church on Sunday. And it's like the generation, like my nieces all went to Catholic school, they married, they don't go to church. My mama bought us Bible books when we were little. We knew all the little stories, and it's just like going, you don't see that in the family anymore.
Well, and this is, and I said I wasn't going to hit home, but a big problem is there is absolutely no catechesis going on at the home. But forget catechesis in the home. Who has a mother and a father anymore? Right? So we have ultimate dysfunction, and you've seen who brings the kids to church.
Mom and dad.
Or grandparents.
Grandparents, generally.
Grandma.
Yep.
Grandpa.
They're racing.
Mom. Dads are you know, you get the dad to be a faithful dad, and this is where Joel Bierman does an excellent job with family stuff, is dads have got to quit being losers, you know, and raise your kids, you know. I don't know if we want to edit that, but you know, it's serious. I mean, who's responsible for catechesis? As the head of the household, you know. So Christianity then becomes a girl thing, right? And we haven't helped ourselves. I mean, we doll the place up with a lot of flowers and things like that, right? It becomes a girl thing. So the sons are raised up and they say, okay, only when I'm bigger, then I can go to the golf course with Dad, or then I can stay home with Dad and watch football, or I can go to the lake with Dad, do what Dad does. So then we've raised up another generation to be unfaithful to their wives, and it's just a whole mess.
Also, I think our culture today is immersed in entertainment, and also, I mean, look, we all have our phones. When I was a kid, right? That's how you know I'm getting old when I say when I was a kid. But most of us older folks, we remember you had 2 or 3 channels with the rabbit ears.
He has no idea what you mean.
But well, I'm sure he's read about it in school.
Yeah.
But nowadays, I mean, it's 24/7 entertainment on the screen, on demand, movies on demand, whenever you want. There's a very short time preference, to use an economics term, and that's the soup we swim in, so to say. That's our culture. And then along comes the church with this big eternal worldview, and it's very personal and face to face. I mean, you get Jesus put on your tongue, and you drink the cup. I mean, it's not virtual. It's not anything electronic, and I think we have to kind of break through that. It's tough because we're asking people to leave their comfort zone. And, you can just wake up on your day off in bed and roll over, put your phone on and do Facebook. And we, to come to church, you have to get dressed. You have to come here. And there's a certain, with the ritual, there's a certain amount of learning that goes on. And it's work. It's hard. It's different. I think it's different for younger people than it is. I think there's a sliding scale. The older you are, the less changed by technology and the constant demand for entertainment that you have. And for younger people, it's a virtually 24/7 world of entertainment, virtual reality, this kind of thing. And Christianity is, it just doesn't fit that mold. There's a YouTube of Grace Lutheran Church in Tulsa. That's a really good YouTube video. It shows the hectic, world outside, and then you walk into the church, and everything it's slow, it's meditative, and there's readings, and it's quiet. And then at the end of the service, it goes back to all the craziness. But we have to, people need to appreciate the fact that for that hour, at least in church, to come, to pray, to contemplate, to hear the Word of God, that's worth doing because they have so many other choices in their lives of things they can do. Somehow we got to get the impression to them, get the message to them. Look, this is an option that you have, and it's the best option you could possibly want, and it will change your life completely. That's a tough thing to do, though.
And then to pull them out of that, where they can actually sit for an hour and a half, right? So craft a 20-minute sermon when people are used to 30-second snippets, right? So now, rhetorically, we have to create where you can preach for a couple minutes, like you have a whole sermon, you preach for a couple minutes, and if you lost them for a couple minutes, they can come back in 6 minutes later,
Well, I have to disagree. The pragmatics of that is irrelevant because the evangel will do what the evangel does, and you can't stop God from being God. So in the midst of even their weakness, he still has his way with those that he elects, calls, gathers, enlightens. And we're talking about retention here. When you continue to try to thrust ideas that are, let's say, evangelicalism. All isms are dangerous, but evangelicalism, because we're talking about 4 different things we've been kind of jumping around. But you're mainly focusing on the liturgy being catechesis, which is to the baptized. And so that's what you want to do. You want to retain. The miracle of conversion may take place, but it's very rare that's what it's going to do. Wander off the street, oh, thank you, Jesus, I found you. But that's not reality. So as we take care of the baptized in the midst of the presence of God, he has promised and he's faithful. So your biggest call that you had said moments ago was this fidelity that is acted out in love. Because apart from love, it will be offensive, as you said, because of the hardness of individual hearts. They run away so quickly. If somebody walks in the door, Pastor, and there's a certain right way that you love them, they will come back in and they'll give you another shot. And they'll give you another shot.
Those of you who knew Ron Reinhardt, that's what he was very good at. If y'all knew him, I mean, every time you could get a profile glimpse of him, and it's like, man, that guy loves me. You know, he was good at it.
Made you feel, well, that's very important for all people who are in the ministry. When Jesus says, speak the truth in love, that truth, the cognitive reality of the divine will bring forth a wonderful, emotive, subjective joy in the heart of the believer, the baptized. Because people are looking for the experience. We have the best altar call in the world. And it should be nothing but everybody should be so excited. The whole purpose for the church, and not the other thing, is in order that the presence of God may manifest himself upon earth in order to bring forth communion. God has brought forth communion through his Son, and so love manifests itself in the essence at the altar. And that's why it's a sin not for that to be present among God's people. Because say, no thank you, we don't need you, Jesus. Not today. That's a little too much of you. I mean, it's senseless. It's absolutely senseless.
Anything else?
You were just talking about liturgical catechesis, and it's interesting that, we learn what we value by doing it, and when we do it and we hear about, it carries us to Christ. It carries the gospel to us. We've seen this in our education. The problem is so many people are never educated in that. They can show up and do it. They don't even know why they're doing it or what it means. And this is just an experience of mine. You might not like the way this particular pastor did it. I was living in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I was going to St. Paul's Lutheran Church. Pastor Park Frederick was there. And he would, on occasion, maybe once every year and a half, I wasn't long enough to see him do it twice, but he told me he did. He would actually do a divine service, and he would say ahead of time to the congregation that he said, I'm not going to preach my regular sermon at the time of the sermon. You might have heard this being done before, but what he did, he said, my sermon will be interspersed throughout this service, and then he would give a snippet of what we're going to do and why we do it, and then we do it. So he'd talk about the invocation, and then he'd do the invocation. And then he would talk about, the confession and absolution, then we do it. And that was his sermon, and it was in the context of a divine service. And he said how this leads us to Christ, how this brings us to Christ, how this prepares us for Christ, how Christ is at work in this. And as a layman, I thought, this is brilliant. Nobody has ever taught me this before. And a lot of people, I went and talked to him afterwards about it because I was thinking of going to seminary at the time. And I sat down in his office, we had a cup of coffee and a nice talk, and he said, I could do this in a catechesis class, but they won't come. I can do it on Wednesday night, but they won't come. I can do it in Sunday school, but they don't come. My shot to get them is here. And maybe that's not the function and purpose of a sermon, is always didactic, but he took that one opportunity and he led everybody in the congregation through the divine service, showing what the meaning was. We learned about it, we did it. And I never felt more prepared to receive the sacrament as I did in that service. And that was back in the days where, you could get a tape, and I said, can I get the tape of this? And I wore that tape out listening to it over and over. And that's the sadness of the world we live in, is sometimes we get one shot to get at people, and it's Sunday in the divine service. And that's how he did liturgical catechesis. He said, I wish I didn't have to do it this way, but he said, I found this effective, and it got to me. And I carried that down through the years. I actually, when I got to a new congregation, I tried doing it. And so I said, well, I'm going to kind of put it together like he did. And some people came up to me and they said, I never knew that's why we did this. So that's why we also don't ditch it to save 10 minutes. Why we don't ditch the Gloria in Excelsis and just sing a praise medley, or why we don't ditch the Agnus Dei or the Sanctus. And when people heard that, they appreciated it. And when they went through it the next time,
Or why when you have confirmation or teacher installations or this or that, and all of a sudden it's already 12 o'clock and you haven't even begun to get to the service of the sacrament, you don't just go up to the altar and say, the words of institution and go to distribution. I mean, there's a place for it all.
But that was liturgical catechesis within the context of the divine service. And you might not think that's a great thing because that's not what it's there for. But I tell you what, it got me. And that congregation, people had a lot of options in Ann Arbor. That was a pretty conservative, I would say he was confessional pastor. There were a lot of students there. A lot of University of Michigan and Eastern Michigan University students who went there for that because they were hungry for that, and they got it,
Any last comments or questions?